Doesn't look like Jill either. So
No.
there's that. Are we all set, John? All right. So I would like to call to order this Board of Education Budget, Finance, and Operations Committee meeting for Monday, March 21st. And we have, as usual, we have our two primary discussion items. And we will just start with the financial report ending February 28th, 2022. And here, I presume David's going to present that?
Yes.
I would be happy to.
For those that are listening from the public, David Fiorello is here from Twin Lakes Consulting. He is supporting us as we transition from our previous director, Dawn Norton, to our new director, Jill Brown. Jill is certainly working in collaboration to make sure that we're all on the same page as she transitions in. But in the meantime, she has a full-time job somewhere else. So we have David here with us this evening.
Thank you so much. Just a little quick background about myself. I've been a school business official in Connecticut for 9 years and 15 years total. I am a professional certified 085. I have known Jill personally, just working together. It's a small world of business managers and helping to kind of plug the gap. So glad to be here. Glad to meet you. I've tried very hard to follow the same format that Dawn had presented in the past. You're actually at a really good part of the year to do a transition because you're not beginning or ending the year. We're kind of right in the middle. So I'll do my best to kind of give you a quick update on kind of where we are, and we'll go from there. So again, I follow the same format as Dawn had used. This is month ending February 28th. So even though we're March 21st already, which is crazy, this is for the month ending of February. The Board of Education has expended and obligated, meaning encumbered, $99.452 million of the $102.626 million budget. That represents about 97.25. Now, there are certain items that are not encumbered yet and typically wouldn't be at this time. These are things like FICA and Medicaid or Medicare and spring sports. Moving down on the report itself, I'm sure you know all of what I'm about to tell you already, probably better than I do. Financially, the school is primarily based on people. So a lot of your budget is personnel based. So almost 60% of it in your district's case. Another 15% is medical benefits. Both of these things are as expected at this time of the year. There's no big deficiencies or variances, which is a good thing, since that is nearly 75% of your overall budget. There are a few line items in your budget that do have some variability. We watch these ones very closely as we go throughout the year. Other post-employment benefits, these are things like pension and OPEB payments account for about 73% of this. This is your pension contributions towards your town categories. These are also on track. Special education, I think this was mentioned before. It is partially funded through the state, and it's been underfunded for probably 5 years now, maybe longer. They've essentially flatlined the amount that they give to school districts, regardless of how many kids need special education. So what they do is they set a budget at, I think it's $130 million. And that's based on all special education outplacements in the state. And then depending on kind of where your district falls and your average cost per student, there's a fun little formula they calculated. It's 4.5 times your per average student cost, yada, yada. And when you get over that, you actually do get a reimbursement for this district. That was budgeted at about $1.4 million. So coming out of a pandemic, and this is not specific to your district, many districts have seen an increase in an uptick in special education costs. There has been, it's interesting, as we went into the pandemic, and I'm going to pontificate for a second, we were very scared about learning loss. And what's really come out of it is the learning loss isn't quite as bad as we thought it might be. But we've had a lot more anxiety and special education issues that we weren't expecting. So you're actually seeing some increased costs as we identify these. So it's something that's happening. It's part of what it is. A good part is the state is aware of it, and hopefully they will up the amount that they support districts in that regards. I know you have a very, very strong special ed director, so complete confidence. Transportation is another area that has been impacted, but for other reasons. We have had good and bad things happen in transportation. We had all sorts of challenges finding drivers earlier in the year coming out of pandemic. And this had impacts on routes, and there actually could have been some savings there. But then there's some other sides of it. When they do find drivers, they're having to increase costs. You're outsourced transportation. It's hard to find routes. The routes that we do get are more expensive. And then to kind of add fuel to the fire, the cost of fuel has started to go up quite a bit. So you kind of get both sides of that. With that said, right now, all transportation is on track, on budget. So you have a little bit on both sides. Energy, another area for consideration. We were talking about this a little bit this morning. Typically, we can lock in electricity generation rates. The nice thing about Connecticut's decentralized, so you have some options. You can bid it out to different providers. There's a few out there. You are locked in at this district through November of 22, which is a good thing. But rates have spiked dramatically in the last few months. And so right now, we are looking at what they are. But we haven't made any decisions going into next year. The other piece of that is fuel prices, oil prices specifically. Some districts were able to lock in last fall. A part of that is luck. I say every year I can be the hero or the zero, depending on when I lock in. I don't know anything more than anybody else knows. Sometimes I get lucky and lock in a great rate at a good time. Sometimes you don't. You budget what you hope is a reasonable amount. Knowing that prices have almost doubled in the last few months, it makes sense to probably hit the pause button for a while. Worst case scenario, you won't need oil until October of next year. So you can't always go on the spot market with the hopes of oil coming back down. But if there is a significant pullback in the next few months, the district would definitely come forward and make a recommendation to consider hedging part or all of next year's fuel purchases, just to give some assurances so you don't get halfway through the year and oil prices continue to go up and you have these budget variances, which is what you really don't want as a public institution. So again, quick summary, items that could positively affect the budget. I think some of these were mentioned last month. Any type of outplaced student returning to Ridgefield. If we're able to accommodate a student in-house, even if it involves hiring a parent to do that, in some cases actually can save the district money and produce better outcomes. Short and long-term disability claims and workman's comp claims could come in positively, and then obviously unpaid leaves of absences. Things that could negatively impact the budget is the same thing. Outplaced students, so special ed outplacements. These can, a single student can cost more than six figures, and quite typically does. Unforeseen plan expenditures. So these are things like boiler replacements or pumps or drain lines, things that always seem to break when you least want them to, and they sometimes can be pricey. I'm sure there is money based into your budget to replace certain items at certain times, but there's always the chance for unexpected capital. Substitute teacher expenses, finding teachers, paras, custodians. Again, it's hard to find, hard to fill. The low end wages seem to be creeping up. It's harder to, at least in my experience, and I apologize, I'm not as familiar with Ridgefield. It's been really hard lately to fill vacant positions at custodial levels and at para levels. Just less people applying for these positions, more vacancies. We had an interesting winter. We had some really cold spells and we had some warm spots, which is, I guess, probably not uncommon for Connecticut. But if you have a really a couple cold months, like we had a pretty good drop in weather a couple weeks ago, that will generate more cost, more oil usage. So you have two sides of the oil. You have the price that you pay and the usage that you had. So we're very cognizant of trying to keep the heat at reasonable levels within the building, but also understanding that weather is going to play an impact on that. And then I did add gas prices related to transportation. We have been reached out to by a number of our special ed transportation vendors in the last few weeks, saying that there's going to be additional surcharges on the routes because of fuel prices that weren't expected when they put initial route quotes on these things. So all in all, I think you're in a pretty good spot coming into this part of the year. As we get closer to the end of the year, we'll have a better update on where we're going to project out, what we'll end at. I don't see a deficit, but I don't see a huge surplus either, which is fine. That means you budgeted appropriately and you manage your expenses appropriately. Are there any questions on the memo component of what I just shared?
Anyone on the committee?
Great. So in addition to the memo, I did put a report, the February budget report. So again, in the far left column, $102.2 million annual budget. We have actually expended $63.6 million through the end of February, with another $35 million encumbered. It looks like $2.6 million unencumbered, but again, there are certain things that haven't been encumbered. FICA, Medicare, spring sports, different areas. So that number will come down as we get closer to the end of the year. And of course, changes in special education. Any specific questions on this report?
Anyone on the committee?
Great. And then finally, I put together a transfers report. Typically, the board looks at kind of high level transfers, but I understand that you'd like to see them all, and that's a great thing to understand the the nuance of day to day. So anything that moves account string will add to this report, and that's any dollar amount. So this particular month there was a couple smaller transfers, which are pretty typical in the school environment. So for example, transportation for cheerleading in a fall and field hockey in a fall wasn't fully utilized, and that was because there was a couple varsity games that were not played due to COVID. So the athletic department asked to repurpose these funds to cover rev track fees and to support some additional athletic office supply purchases. That was $2,400. Same thing with girls volleyball for the fall. Funds remaining for transportation fall were not used because of a canceled sub-varsity games not played to COVID. These funds were used in the security and health line to cover additional police needed at basketball games due to capacity limits in the winter. So if you really look closely at your athletics lines, athletics still on track. You're just moving funds within essentially the department. So they're not asking for an additional appropriation or less. That's what they've requested. There's been a couple more transfers that have come through thus far, and I will keep that running list going for this committee so you can see them all.
Any questions from the committee?
Pretty straightforward. The limiting capacity due to COVID. We're still limiting capacity in the gym. What's
this was on? For? I'm sorry. This was for winter.
Okay. So this is got it.
It seems to be opening up, and Doctor, you could probably speak to that better than I could. But it seems like things are getting more traditional. So things will probably.
I just was wondering when this was. It sounds like it predates the current conditions, so I get it.
They'll typically do this different seasons: fall, winter, spring, and then when the season's concluded, they'll look at where things fell and then make the transfers after the fact.
I get it, but this should. First of all, there's a typo. It says these funds, but it should say whether it was fall, winter, or spring, so we have some frame of reference. I think. But maybe
so on the left side it does actually. So it says, and I did.
Okay, fall. Got it. No, but that's transferring from the fall budget to security and health at undetermined time.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Good question.
We can add that clarity, and there actually are several typos in both of those sections.
Yeah,
they get cut and pasted. Yeah, we can clean that up. That gets cut and pasted from whoever's sending the narrative.
Yeah, sure. Nope. Just before it goes to the full board.
I don't want David to take the heat for that one.
No,
even though he's a numbers guy.
No, if I had to guess, they were typing on a cell phone. So
yeah, probably.
Well, I can tell you, I have worked in a number of districts in the past few years, and you have a really solid staff the folks that I've met over the last few weeks are just really on their game. It seems like a very well-oiled machine. So it's been very easy to kind of jump in and keep things moving. And I've known Jill for a number of years, and I think you're going to be in really good hands with her going forward. So glad to be here to help out for the next few weeks. And I have no doubt that you'll do some great things. So thank you again for the opportunity. And I know you're going to be in a great spot going forward. So.
Perfect. All right, very good. Did anyone on the committee have any questions?
Nope.
Before we adjourn? All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Tom, you want a second? Perfect. All in favor?